This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Good morning, everybody. Well, lots and lots of political news today, and quite a bit of it seems to involve UKIP and Henry Bolton, the leader, who has certainly upset many within the party. And this afternoon, he's been summoned to an emergency meeting of UKIP's NEC, where there will be a motion of confidence vote on his leadership. So that's very much in the news. And other stories, you know, I read on page 2 of the Mail on Sunday, Farage poised to launch UKIP Mark II. I'm apparently on the verge of launching a new political party, and I'm going to tell you whether that's true or not a little bit later on. But far more important than Henry Bolton or me, in fact, the most powerful man in the world, whether you love him or whether you hate him, a year ago yesterday, and I was there. It was a dark, cloudy, relatively mild day in Washington. And this is what we heard from the incoming 45th President of the United States of America.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
the
office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And in his inauguration speech, he did point out the failures of previous administrations.
Mothers and children trapped in poverty in our inner cities. Rusted out factories scattered like tombstones across the landscape. And the crime and the gangs and the drugs that have stolen too many lives and robbed our country of so much unrealized potential. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now.
And he promised he would, as president, turn around the economy and make America great again.
Do not allow anyone to tell you that it cannot be done. No challenge can match the heart and fight and spirit of America. We will not fail. Our country will thrive and prosper again. Your hopes and your dreams will define our American destiny. And your courage and goodness and love will forever guide us along the way. Together, we will make America strong again. We will make America wealthy again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And yes, together, we will make America great again.
Well, I was there, and a lot of people said the speech lacked dignity. It wasn't the kind of speech they expect from incoming presidents. Well, what do you expect? He's a real estate guy from New York. He's never been a politician in his life. That was his first ever day in political office of any kind at all. And I have to say, 1 year on, any thought that this 71-year-old self-made billionaire is somehow going to change or stop tweeting, all of that is for the birds. He is who he is. I supported him during that campaign. I spoke in Mississippi at a campaign rally. I certainly thought he was better for us than Hillary. Why? He was pro-Brexit. He was pro-British. And I thought for us, he was the right person to come in to be president. I know his style is a bit rough and a bit tough. I know he says things that occasionally the vast majority of people consider to be vulgar or crass. I understand that. I get all that. But he's there to kind of shake things up. He's there to lead a different agenda. And 1 year on, the debate I want to have with you this morning is, has he been a success or has he been a failure? Now, if you think it's been a year solely of fake news, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think he is making America great again, in which case text to 84850. Or if you think he's a complete clot and a total embarrassing disaster, well, of course you can. On Twitter, using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Let me know what you think. And you don't just watch us on Facebook if you want to. You can comment there as well. Well, earlier on, I interviewed Seb Gorka. He was a former White House strategist to President Trump, spent a lot of time working with the president. He was there for 6 months, But of course, like so many over the course of this year, it's certainly a game of revolving chairs, isn't it? And I began by reminding him that 1 year ago this weekend, he and I were there at the inauguration, but I pointed out it's a rather odd first anniversary because they're about to have a government shutdown.
It's very embarrassing, really, for the congressmen and women on the Hill and the senators, because we've had an incredible year. If you look domestically, we've had the economy go gangbusters, lowest unemployment in 17 years, lowest African unemployment since we started recording in 1945, stock market records being broken every day almost. Internationally, the crushing of ISIS, revitalization of our relations across the world with Israel and in Asia and elsewhere. But just at the end of this week, we see the Hill that's responsible for the budgets punt it again, and as a result, because they're desperate to legalize the illegal immigrants here in the United States, they couldn't pass the budget or the continuing resolution that would afford the government its money to do its job as of Monday. So, yeah, it's a real embarrassment for the establishment, but for Donald Trump, it's been a great year.
And then I asked him that even though Trump's got a majority in both houses, why can't he get this passed? Why's the budget not gone through?
This isn't a real budget that could be passed with just 51 votes out of the 100 senators. It is a continuing resolution. We've had this completely asinine way of funding the government in place for years now. And because of rules that the Democrats put in place, a continuing resolution can be filibustered unless you have 60 votes in the Senate. The Republicans only have 51 votes, which means the Democrats have held the continuing resolution, this budget, absolutely hostage unless the president caves on the illegal migrants under the DACA bill put in place by Obama. So it's a technicality that despite having the House, despite having the Senate, the funding of the government is hostage to the Democrat Party.
Now, this happened to Obama back in 2013, where there was a 16-day government shutdown. So I asked Seb Gorka, what are the prospects here for a resolution?
Well, I think actually very good. If you look at the CNN poll that came out, I think it was Saturday morning, the majority of Americans aren't buying the narrative being pitched by the Democrats, by the left, and are connecting the shutdown of the government with the Democrats. They see the narrative as, you don't want to fund the armed forces because you would rather protect illegal immigrants. That narrative, that spin is very bad for the Democrats. So, Nigel, I think they're going to cave in a matter of a day or two.
Now, I've got a red baseball cap that says Make America Great Again, as, of course, millions of people have. And I asked Gorka, I said, 1 year on, is Trump actually making America great again?
Given what's happened in just the last 12 months, you have to say absolutely. Look, he's going to be an 8-year president, then followed by Vice President Pence stepping into his shoes. But look, I could reel off, it would take us such a long time. But again, the economy is going incredibly well. Apple, for example, has committed just last week to bring billions of dollars from offshore accounts back into the U.S. That means jobs. He passed the tax reform bill, which means as of next month, Americans are going to see more money in their paychecks. I'll give you one metric. How about this one, Nigel? When we came in on the 20th of January last year, the president said American business, American individuals, American liberties being strangled by the overregulation of life in general and business in particular. He made a promise. I'm not going to sign any new measure unless 2 existing regulations are rescinded before I sign that measure. So there's a 2-to-1 ratio. By the end of his first year in office, that ratio has gone from 1 to 2 to 1 to 22. For every new regulation President Trump has signed, he has abolished 22 regulations from the Obama era, and that's just unshackling America.
Now, I made the point that in the book Fire and Fury, Michael Wolff talks about the president's behaviour, and to call it very erratic, I think, in that book would be an understatement. Said, knowing that Gorka had spent a considerable amount of time with Trump, I asked him, sum him up for me as a person.
He is like an 18-wheel lorry. He isn't erratic. He is unstoppable. He's a force of nature. Nigel, if I had, at age 47, a quarter of the energy that this 71-year-old man has, I would be very, very grateful. He is a man who owes nothing to the establishment, nothing to the elite, nothing to the kinds of people that were anti-Brexit, or the people who believe that the elites are smarter than the average voter. He is the rank outsider, and he knows exactly what he wants. And I'll tell you what drives him in every decision he takes, very simply the following. He wants all Americans to be safe, especially from terrorist attack. And number two, he wants all Americans to prosper. That's what you need to know about Donald Trump.
Now, Gorka there, still very supportive of the president, but of course he was somebody who after 6 months left the White House. So I asked him, come on, be frank with me, what has Trump's biggest mistake been?
The thing that disappointed me the most, and it's really the reason that I decided to leave the administration and support the president from the outside, is a lack of a forward enough leaning policy on the bureaucracy. We have this phrase here called the swamp. We're here to drain the swamp. Most people think that's Capitol Hill, that's the professional politicians that don't really represent their constituents. For me, having worked inside the White House, there's a much more dangerous aspect of the swamp, and that's the bureaucrats, the faceless bureaucrats who think they know better than the duly elected commander-in-chief. Far too many people who are politically loyal to President Obama and to the radical left are still in positions of influence. That swamp needs to be drained at a far faster rate than it has been in the first year. That's my biggest disappointment. But that can be done as well.
And of course, Russia, special investigations, and of course, my name back in the press again over the weekend. Apparently, I took a memory stick from the White House and gave it to Julian Assange. So I am part of this great conspiracy. More on that, but for the moment, it's 10:16. On a very tough day for UKIP, and in particular its leader, Henry Bolton, I'm going to respond to the Farage poised to launch UKIP Mark II, a new political party story in the Mail on Sunday. But first, Russia. The global establishment was so horrified by Brexit and by Trump winning that they had to find a reason that all of this had happened. Now, part of it, of course, was that we'd lied, and that gets repeated every single day. But the big one is that there was collusion with Putin and with Russia. And I just don't know how many times my name has been linked in with all of this. And then on Friday, a whole new story pops up. Glenn Simpson, a private investigator, who's got a company that's been compiling dossiers on the alleged conspiracy between Trump and the Russians. His testimony before a US congressional inquiry that took place in November came out, or leaked out, more accurately, on Friday. And in it, he said, Nigel Farage may have given Julian Assange a thumb drive of data and was possibly a more frequent visitor than was publicly known to the Ecuadorian embassy where the WikiLeaks founder lives. And yes, he said, I've been told this. So let's just get this right. Someone tells somebody something they think might have happened. That somebody speaks about it, and it becomes news. It's printed. Can I answer this by simply saying that the Ecuadorian embassy is the most surveilled building in this country? And I think I'm reasonably recognisable, you know. And the thought that I've been a regular visitor and that I've been carrying this bag back and forth across the Atlantic with secret thumb drives that Bannon and Trump have given me to give to WikiLeaks is complete and utter and total codswallop. And I genuinely believe that the whole Robert Mueller investigation into collusion with Russia, frankly, it's been going on for months. I think it's going nowhere. But there's been a new twist in the last 2 or 3 days. And it's really interesting, this, because had this twist been a potential anti-Trump story, I think every one of you would know something about it, because the British press would have gone bonkers on it. It's all about something that is called the memo. And there is a private memo that senators and congressmen have been allowed to see and read, but under oath not to disclose its contents. This may well be a story that's a big one by the end of this week in this country. If you've not heard of the memo, don't worry. Virtually no one has. But I did ask Seb Gorka to explain what this next new twist could be.
For more than a year, we've had this hysterical set of accusations that the Trump campaign colluded with Vladimir Putin to win the election, when, in fact, every decision the president has taken since the inauguration has been bad for Russia, from arming the Ukrainians right on through to our energy policy. So in the meantime, some very, very brave investigative journalists here in America, Sarah Carter, John Solomon, and others, have worked on the real story. And the real story is about the targeting of the Trump campaign by the Obama administration's intelligence assets and by the FBI. And the denouement is a 4-page memo, classified memo, from Congress, which goes into details, naming names at the top of the FBI under the Obama administration of individuals who are complicit or who conspired to use American intelligence assets, the FISA court, this is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court, to spy upon their political opponents during the election campaign last year. So it's real banana republic stuff. And now if you go on Twitter, you'll see the hashtag release the memo. More than 100 congressmen have read that classified memo, and they have said shocking things on television, saying this is the biggest political scandal in modern American history. So there is a massive push to release that memo, but my sources tell me it is just the tip of the iceberg, Nigel.
So it could well be that far from Trump being in trouble, it may well be the other side that come out of the elections of 16 with some real problems. And I also put to Gorka rumours swirling that, in fact, the US intelligence agencies had actually asked British intelligence at GCHQ to do some of their dirty work for them.
Yes, there is some talk. I can't substantiate that, but that would be a sad day, because that's not the kind of thing we expect from the special relationship.
Now, in America, it's constant elections, but there is something called the midterms. So in November this year, there are lots and lots of seats up in the Congress, in the Senate. And I said to Gorka, was this not the biggest challenge that Trump faced in 2018?
That is the conventional wisdom. But again, I warn anybody from judging this president based upon existing trends, existing taxonomy. And remember, this man broke all the rules when it came to forecasting and trending. I want to remind your listeners, on the day of the election, November the 8th, 2016, the New York Times said that Hillary Clinton has a 95% chance of winning the election based upon polling. So the existing forecasting methods, the existing trends are not going to tell you what's going to happen in our election here this time round. But there's one very simple thing. I'm a national security wonk. I'm interested in foreign policy. At the end of the day, most presidents, unless it's World War II, are judged by the economy, by what people see in their paycheck at the end of the month. And just based upon that metric alone, Donald Trump is sitting pretty.
And a very nice LBC twist to the end of this interview, because the man that worked for 6 months in the White House as an advisor to President Trump, like me, grew up listening to LBC.
I was an absolute addict. I used to lie in bed till the wee hours as a teenager listening to Adrian Love. So for me, being on LBC, especially on your show, warms the cockles of my heart.
Well, I grew up listening to Jeremy Beadle on LBC, doing the late night show in the late 70s into the early 80s. Well, you've heard Seb Gorka, and that is a very pro what the president has done in the first year. series of comments. I did ask CNN whether they put somebody up to give the other side. Sadly, they haven't, because it's almost as if, since the election, CNN are the opposition, not the Democrats. Over to you, Lisa in Borehamwood. We're a year in to the Trump presidency. Is he winning or losing?
I think he's winning, and I think the best is yet to come. I think he's going to go on the offensive. He's been on the defensive. He was surrounded by neocons. He had to get rid of a lot of people who were leaking and not really his allies. He had to work out who his friends were. And I think now he's done exceptionally well considering what he's up against. I mean, 2 million jobs, the growth is up, there's the lowest unemployment for the black community and the Hispanic community.
Yes, that was interesting, wasn't it, Lisa? That was very... Because one of the criticisms is, well, what's he going to do for the black community? And the answer, of course, is, what did Obama do for them?
Well, that's what no one ever looks at critically, is this whole identity politics. You know, if you're of an ethnic group, you have to hate Trump. I believe he will do more for those communities because he knows what they really need. What will really uplift people is jobs, not more of the welfare warfare state. So I think he's going to do brilliantly. I just want to say this whole Russia hoax, it gets my blood boiling. It's the most ridiculous thing. And the guest you just had, that although what he was saying was incredibly interesting, I think the only person who will want to interview him is Alex Jones, because the rest of the media, including the media in this country, have an agenda, and their agenda is one thing: just perpetuate hate, anger, and hostility towards Trump by making a mountain out of the tiniest thing. They'll report anything they can that seems...
Lisa, I agree with that. And as I say, the idea that there is this, the fact there is this 4-page memo that is being seen up on Capitol Hill, suggesting that actually the US intelligence services, in cahoots with the Obama administration, were actually in many ways spying on Trump during the election period. If the boot was on the other foot, it'd be a huge story. So I think you're right, Lisa. Lisa, I thank you for your call. Well, so far, it's support for Trump. But I know that in this country, 2/3 of you in an opinion poll today in the Sunday Express saying you don't think he should visit this country. Boris, by the way, on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph saying Trump should come. I know I'm very much in a minority in this country in thinking that Trump is doing a good job. So come on, tell me where he's got it wrong. 0345 6060 973. Oh, and I'll tell you about whether I'm about to set up UKIP Mark II. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. A year of Trump, and we're discussing, has he been a success or has he been an appalling failure? But there's lots and lots and lots of UKIP in the news and speculation. Sunday Times, Farage may launch new Brexit party. Mail on Sunday, Farage poised to launch UKIP Mark II. What is the truth of it? Well, I'll tell you this. I, of course, over the course of the last few weeks and months, have had a lot of meetings with people. I think there is a really big need to get Leave campaigners back working together. And I say that from a cross-party perspective. I think we need a much more coherent business voice out there arguing for Leave. It's the CBI and the others, and it is the Remainers making the running. And I am so worried about the parliamentary arithmetic that I think unless those arguments continue to be made and to be campaigned for, I fear that the deal, whatever it is, it doesn't look like a very good one, may lose in the Commons, precipitating a crisis, and I fear a second referendum. And for all the completely willful misinterpretation of my comments, I don't want a second referendum. There shouldn't be any need for it, but I fear it. So have I had conversations about bringing people together to get the Brexit campaign firing again on all cylinders? Yes. Am I on the verge of forming a new party? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It isn't going to happen, but I'm certainly concerned about the state of UKIP. And I pretty much kept out of the Henry Bolton business because I don't think it really becomes former leaders of parties to get involved with their disputes. I do just wonder to myself, if UKIP finishes up having yet another leadership election, whether it can actually survive that. But not my decision. The NEC of UKIP, a group of volunteers from all over the country, elected on a list, although virtually at random, hardly any of whom have any qualifications to make this decision, but it's their job this afternoon to decide whether they still have confidence in Henry Bolton as leader. And I understand, and he's been going around some studios in the last half an hour, I understand that Henry is going to that meeting and saying, no, I've no intention of resigning. My private life's my private life. I wish to continue in the role. So they meet at 2 o'clock this afternoon. My guess is by 4 o'clock there'll be a lot of stories about Henry, UKIP and the NEC. Back to Donald Trump. Francis says on Twitter, absolute nonsense from Gawker. Sycophantic propaganda. Trump has the lowest approval rating in the recent history at this point. Francis, you are absolutely right. Other presidents have had much higher approval ratings at this time. In fact, George Bush Sr. at one point had over 80% approval rating and then went on to lose the next election. And I think if you look at the approval ratings, Trump is on about 40% approval ratings. But when people are asked, Francis, is he doing a good job? 46% say he is doing a good job. And I think perhaps we somewhat misread these approval ratings. In a sense, we're almost asking, do you like the president? And my view is there may be plenty of people in America that don't like his style, don't like him very much, but think he's doing a good job. And it brings to mind Mrs. Thatcher. You know, she was not everyone's cup of tea. A lot of people did not like her very much, but thought she was the right leader for the time. So you're right to say his approval ratings are lower than others, but I think that's more a question about his personality. And hey, he can be pretty abrasive. Mike is a first-time caller from Stoke-on-Trent. Good morning, Mike.
Oh, good morning. Nice to speak to you.
Nice to speak to you, Mike. So we're a year in. Is he a success or is he a disaster, Mike?
Well, for me, I'm afraid he's a big disappointment. I was quite in favour of him at first. I certainly thought he was going to be better than Hillary Clinton would have been.
Yeah.
Because, to me, she's a known warmonger. Now, he said he was going to work with Russia, and I think he got a lot of votes because of that. But just recently, he's agreed to sell arms to Ukraine, increase the arms. He's invading Syria. There are now bases in Syria when they promised, the previous president promised they wouldn't have boots on the ground. He's threatened to intervene in Venezuela. So he's just turned out to be another warmongering United States president. I'm not interested in his private life.
No.
I'm interested in his foreign policy.
Yeah, I mean, Mike...
So I think it's a disaster.
There was always, through the campaign, there was always this one slight inconsistency, wasn't there? Because on the one hand, he said, I'm not a neocon, I'm not going to get involved in war after war after war, and he stated at every campaign rally that he thought Iraq had been a mistake, because actually it wasn't anyone in Iraq who was behind bringing down the Twin Towers and bombing the Pentagon. But he also, Mike, said during those rallies that he would do all he could to crush ISIS. So the answer to why are the Americans active in Syria and elsewhere is because they've been out fighting ISIS. And I think, Mike, unless I'm deluding myself, but I think militarily they've given ISIS one hell of a beating, haven't they?
ISIS has been taken care of by Russia. It's never in the press, but it was Russia that defeated ISIS in Syria. They do not. The United States now doesn't need to be in Syria.
No.
They're redundant.
I agree with you. No, Mike, I agree with you. I do agree with you. He's been more interventionist on foreign policy than I thought he would be. But let me ask you an even bigger question about foreign policy, because this is the big one. Rocket Man, you know, his speeches about North Korea, are they, Mike, are they the words of a warmonger, or are they the words of a US president trying to wake the world up to a potential threat?
Well, first of all, the United States hasn't got any right to be in Syria because they invaded their sovereignty. As regards to North Korea, where, of course, the Russians were invited by President Assad. The United Nations says that every country should be sovereign. Anyway, North Korea, well, how far is it from the United States? It's thousands of miles, and yet there they are, 30,000 troops in South Korea. And I think, if I'm right in saying, they're actually in charge of the South Korean army, the Americans. Well,
and that's been the case, Mike, since, is it 1953 or 4 when the Korean War ended? So that's not to do with Trump. But, I mean, previously, We didn't hear much about North Korea at all. Our leaders didn't talk about North Korea. Certainly Obama didn't talk about North Korea. You know, the president said if they step out of line and fire rockets at us, you know, we will respond with fire and fury like the world has never seen. Is that the act, in your view, of a warmonger, or someone trying to get China and Japan and everyone else together to try and stop this guy from developing long-range nuclear weapons?
Nigel, first of all, let me say I take it you agree with me on Syria and the Ukraine.
Mike, I do. I do, and like you, you know, whatever I think of Vladimir Putin, and I wouldn't want to live there, but whatever I think of him, you know, I kind of on the big battle against radical Islamic terrorism / ISIS, we're actually on the same side. So I do think talking to people is useful, yes.
Yeah, I mean, America isn't on the same side, actually, as regards ISIS, because as on the BBC programme, Raqqa's Dirty Secret, Americans let 4,000 ISIS with their weapons and their families escape from Raqqa to go and create mischief somewhere else.
Mike, let me ask you one quick answer. Has Trump been right to raise concerns about Rocket Man?
No, they've got to have nuclear weapons, otherwise they'd be destroyed, just like Gaddafi was.
All right, okay, Mike, I'm going to move on. Mike, very unhappy with Trump's foreign policy, sees him as being much more interventionist than he believed he would be. Desmond, another first-time caller from Camden. Good morning, Desmond.
Good morning to you.
So, is he any good or not, Desmond?
Well, the question is, could you put somebody without any medical experience in charge of a hospital?
Oh, well, you could argue that about virtually every health secretary we've had in this country since the National Health Service was founded 70 years ago.
Yes, precisely. And their response would be that whilst they're not experts, they do listen to their own expert advice. If this is lacking in Mr. Trump, then we have a gigantic problem.
OK, Desmond, one thing that he does have experience of is business, and his sense that government in America had simply got too big, that small and medium-sized businesses were being overburdened with regulation, and his promise that only one new law would be created if two were replaced. And the fact that's now happening in a ratio of 20-1 is, Desmond, I would put to you, one of the reasons why American economy is growing as quickly as it is.
I'm sure that's
from Global's
right.
newsroom at 11.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. The problem with American foreign policy is that they've gone from being, and I'm 68, they've gone from being the heroes, the saviours, as it were, the picture that I grew up with in England, being born in 1949, just after the Second World War.
Yeah.
They've gone through their disastrous foreign policy activities. They've gone to being rather discredited, so that now, even if they were right, if 10 angels said that he was right, nobody would believe him.
I think there is some truth in what you say there, Desmond. I mean, I really, really do. I really, honestly, truthfully do. I wonder, though, Desmond, despite his lack of experience, do you think it would have been better to have Hillary Clinton, who'd spent 30 years in American politics?
I think we would have been better off with Beelzebub himself. Hillary Clinton was Hillary Clinton, it would seem to me, as an amateur outsider viewing it, it was Hillary Clinton that won the election for Trump, not his own qualities alone.
Bit of both, Desmond. A little bit of both. I think she was seen as the career politician. She was seen as the Washingtonian. And she was seen to be far removed from blue-collar voters in Michigan and places like Wisconsin, which she didn't even bother to visit. Desmond, I thank you. And Desmond making the point that he's not really experienced for the job, but I think you can argue that for lots and lots of other people. And what about fake news? What about Trump's war with the media? Let's talk about that in a moment. For now, it's 10:47. There has never been the leader of any country who has been so at war with the mainstream media as Trump. At least I can't think of any example in history. Normally, leaders of countries work with the media, often through absolute gritted teeth. But no such thing with the Donald. And I would say, a year on, the Democrats still have not recovered from their shock defeat. They've no idea who could lead them into the next presidential elections. You know, Bernie Sanders will be well into his 70s by then. Hillary, I think, wants to run again. I just don't know. But they're in trouble. So it's almost as if actually large sections of the media, and in particular the New York Times and CNN, now I think see themselves as the opposition. And that's certainly how Trump sees it. And it was a memorable press conference when the president publicly began pointing out that CNN was fake news, and it was CNN's Jim Acosta who was on the receiving end of this.
Since you are attacking our news organization, can you give us a chance?
Your organization.
You are attacking our news organization. Can you give us a chance to ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir,
Quiet.
Can you give us a question?
Don't be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you
No,
give
I'm
us
not
a
gonna give you
question?
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
I mean, this is a White House press conference. I mean, it's almost like a barroom brawl, isn't it, that's going on? And actually, funnily enough, the BBC's John Sopel also incurred the ire of Trump.
Where are you from?
BBC.
Okay. Here's another beauty.
It's a good line. Impartial, free and fair.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. President.
Just like CNN.
I'm laughing because I'm laughing because a bit of me rather agrees with him, but I'm also laughing because it is just so unconventional. And in many ways, it is that behaviour and it is that language that actually infuriates a lot of people who are expecting him to be a lot more presidential. And that is just never, ever going to happen in a month of Sundays. And he used, in fact, a very rude word the other day, didn't he, to describe a whole host of nations across the world. Now, that was taken by some to be racist. Others would say, well, no, he was talking about corrupt countries that don't look after their own people. But it is an incredibly confrontational style, isn't it? And that run-in with Jim Acosta from CNN is just one of the most remarkable pieces of footage from the last year. Let's get some sanity into this. Let's go to David in Uxbridge. Good morning, David.
Yeah, good morning, Nigel. I think my point is that the main thing Trump has done in the year is this tax cut from 35 to 24%. And that's his big gamble, if you like, because he's adding $1 trillion to the US deficit, which is interesting, the irony of conservatives not worrying about a deficit, but that's another matter. But the gamble is he cannot control what the corporates do with that money, because Bush tried something not at the same scale in 2004, and all the corporates did was just financialise it in the stock market and enrich themselves.
Yeah, and with dividends or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. So they may do that, they may not, but the big promise is he's going to bring back the jobs and the standard of living, and the corporates will only act for they only invest if they think they're going to make money out of it. If they can make more money out of the stock market, speculate and buying back their own. So all that. That's what your game was, Nigel. So you know what it's about.
Well, I was slightly different to that, David. I was in commodities, real things that people made washing machines out of and all the rest of it. But hey, I did work in and around financial markets for a long, long time. David, I'm gonna slightly take issue with you here. I do understand the concern that does this just make the rich richer? Does it mean bigger dividends, etc.? But there's a very big difference between us gradually bringing down corporation tax in this country and the radical cut that Trump has just brought in. And it's this. There is, and no one quite knows, but there's something like $2.5 to $3 trillion of US company profits sitting in bank accounts all over the world, not being repatriated to America because nobody wanted to pay 35% corporation tax. And the evidence thus far, David, is, I think, pretty remarkable. Just this week, Apple announcing that they're bringing $30 billion back into America and that $20 billion of it is immediately or as quickly as possible going into new plant and 20,000 new jobs. And I think, David, that this tax cut, and you know, you're quite right, it's a $1.5 trillion risk, although, of course, some people say with long-term interest rates at 1 or 2%, it's a very cheap time to borrow money. But I think, David, the gamble is that actually it leads to a massive boom in the economy. And I'm going to stick my neck out, David, and say that American growth, which is now 3%, something we couldn't even dream of, is more likely this time next year to be nearer 4%.
Well, you may be right, I may be right, but, you know, they'll make their decisions purely on investment and on profit. And in the past, what they've done, you know, that they've thought investing in productive activity, like research and development, like growing jobs, they think it's not worth it. I'll take the quick buck and invest it in financial speculation. So you may be right, I may be right.
Yeah, but David, your broader point. You know, your broader point about the big corporations not always doing their best for society is a perfectly valid point, and one I think that people on the left and increasingly a lot of people on the right of politics are concerned about, the power of the corporations. I thank you. Ray says on Facebook, brilliant president, shame on these Democrats. Brian says, Trump is an expert on the politics of division, just like yourself. Thank you, Brian, for that lovely Sunday morning message. And you can call it division, or you can actually call it giving people a choice. And if you found the Brexit referendum divisive, well, that's because actually, for decades, what had happened is we had not been given a proper choice. We hadn't had a proper debate. John says to me, I hope Trump doesn't come to the UK. I don't want to see this country embarrassed by all the idiots waving their moronic placards. Well, you say moronic idiots. I mean, there could be people like the Mayor of London could be out there, and Jeremy Corbyn could be out there. They seem to be the one. I mean, that I think is the real reason that Trump is not coming. It's because the Labour Party want to mobilise a very large-scale protest. And yet, in a country like France, whose president is a million miles away politically from Trump, he had a very successful visit there on Bastille Day. Nigel, I think Trump's doing a good job. Some people don't like him because he says it as it is, says Kathy. I'm getting a call from Texas, Conroe in Texas, USA, from Daniel. It's early in the morning in Texas, Daniel.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Nigel. It's about almost 5 a.m. here.
Well, very, very. Are you a regular LBC listener, Daniel?
Every time you're on, which I got to tell you, wreaks havoc with my sleep schedule. I'm going to go ahead and tell you how much I appreciate that right now. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So you're very much, Daniel, you're very much in a Republican part of the USA. I mean, a year in, are you pleased with how he's doing?
Well, I got to tell you, I come at it from the perspective. I'm the leader of probably one of the largest political organizations here in Texas. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that we look at here is that when with Trump as president, you know what you're going to get. I think everyone knew when they went to the polls, they knew what they were going to get, which was a disruptive force. But what I think Trump has done is he's proven really what the challenge is to making any significant reform within the United States. I mean,
very difficult.
What we're looking at here is not a Trump approval rating where people are saying that he's done a good job. What I think they're responding to is his disruption of the bureaucracy. We're dealing with 440 separate federal agencies, 2.5 million unelected bureaucrats. If you were to print the entire code of federal regulations and laws, it would be higher than the Washington Monument. And I think the reason that Trump resonated with so many folks is exactly why those arguments in the Brexit debate resonated with so many folks here in Texas.
Yes. I mean, we had unelected bureaucrats in Brussels, but hey, you've got no shortage of them, have you, in the USA?
Well, it was always fun for us because when we would see the Brexit debate happen and we would see the Brexit side, the Leave side's arguments thrown out, we were here in Texas, well, look, all we have to do is change the nouns, and we've got the same argument.
Yeah. But, Daniel, it's heading in the right direction. I'm sorry. I'm up against the break. I thank you for your call. I thank you for listening. Call us again. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively here on LBC.
Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald. And a year in, I'm asking you, is Trump a success or a failure? And I guess one of the things that has absolutely characterised this last year, and indeed the whole campaign before, is Trump's use of social media. Now, clever political figures and leaders recognise the medium of their day. With Churchill, it was the radio, wasn't it? Those amazing wartime broadcasts, and I sort of have an image in my head of families gathered around the radio listening. In the more modern times, Ronald Reagan on television, incredible. He'd look straight into the camera and say, "My fellow Americans," and it seemed like he was a sort of friendly uncle. He was somebody who was unthreatening, was friendly, was on your side. And Trump has done it on Twitter in a way that is completely and utterly revolutionary. Now, Nick Peters is a former US correspondent for LBC, and he was talking to the current correspondent, Simon Marks, about how Trump uses social media.
What I've witnessed in the last year here in London, looking over at the States and seeing the outright contempt with which media have been treated is truly astonishing. It's like he's opened a Pandora's box. The fact that he can get away with this, and that his core electorate, although his ratings are way down in the low 30s, as I understand it, but his core electorate just believe that it's time the liberal media got their comeuppance, and he can play that game in the same way as I call it a Pandora's box. It's like he's allowed all these furies to come out. It's an absolute mystery to me how anybody's going to be able to put them back in the box. I think we've entered a whole new uncharted territory. And I do believe that this level of mendacity that goes on at the moment, how anybody is going to sweep that Augean stable clean, I just cannot fathom.
So there you are. You see, people who've lived and worked and breathed media for most of their lives are horrified by this president. Indeed, one of his tweets said, "Network news has become so partisan, distorted and fake that licences must be challenged and, if appropriate, revoked. Not fair to the public." So he's threatening to take away their licences. He won't, of course, do that. But it is a war. But his weapon is Twitter, because however many millions watch Fox and watch CNN and all the rest of it, through Twitter, he goes round the back of all of them. Donald Trump now has 47 million Twitter followers. 47 million. I mean, it's absolutely... I've got just over 1 million. I think I'm doing pretty well. 47 million. And he only follows back 45 people. So, what he's built up on social media in political terms just dwarfs anything that we've seen. And one of the reasons in this country, one of the reasons why Corbyn and Momentum were as effective as they were in that general election last year is they have embraced social media in a way the Conservative Party, who frankly on this stuff don't appear to have a clue. They simply haven't. And some of the stuff that he puts out on Twitter that people take seriously, I mean, it's quite extraordinary. He says, "Just heard the foreign minister of North Korea speaking at the United Nations. If he echoes the thoughts of Little Rocket Man, they won't be around much longer." Now, everyone goes absolutely balmy and says the Third World War is about to break out. And they just can't see that with a lot of this stuff, he's actually having a bit of a joke. Here's one that led to people saying, clearly, Trump is a child, completely unfit to be president of the USA. And I heard more than one LBC presenter really, really disturbed by this next tweet. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un just stated that the nuclear button is on his desk at all times. Will someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please inform him that I too have a nuclear button, but it is a much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works. So no, my one's bigger than yours. And everyone goes mad. Everyone says this proves he doesn't have the mental capacity to be the president of the USA. And do you know what he's doing? he's taking the mickey out of all of them. And after, in the book, Fire and Fury, there was talk about whether mentally... And don't forget, this week he did this test, didn't he? He did this Canadian test and he got 30 out of 30. So, you know, it's been proven that the president is not actually mad or going through early-stage dementia. But back at the time of Fire and Fury, it was suggested that Article 25 of the American Constitution, which would mean that he was unfit to be the president and replaced by Pence, may need to be brought in. And he responded to all these stories about his instability with this. Actually, throughout my life, my two greatest assets have been mental stability and being, really smart. Crooked Hillary Clinton also played these cards very hard and, as everyone knows, went down in flames. I went from very successful businessman to top TV star to President of the United States on my first try. I think that would qualify me as not smart, but genius. And a very stable genius at that. And again, they throw their hands up in the air and they all start screaming and say he's a narcissist, he's out of control, he's taking the mickey out of you folks. Get a life. That's my view. I wonder what Martin in Epsom thinks. Good morning, Martin.
Hello. Well, first of all, there were several inaccuracies in that last text, in that last tweet. Obviously, he's not a very successful businessman, having gone bankrupt X amount of times, but never mind. And we'll ignore...
What's he worth now, Martin?
No one knows because he refuses to release his tax return.
All right, so you don't... OK, so let's just...
Wait with bated breath. Anyway, let's ignore
So
that.
are you saying he's a failure in business, Martin?
I think anyone that goes bankrupt more than 4 times probably can't... You know, he may be successful, but very successful, that's pushing it a little bit, I think. I mean, when you've gone bankrupt more times than 50 Cent, then that's... probably not the best.
Well, he's a high roller, Martin, in business, and he's had some huge ups and downs, and that is undoubtedly true. So, is he failing, Martin, as president, in your view?
Well, we'll ignore the current ongoing sexual assault allegations against him because they haven't been settled yet. So we'll just go on to policy and what he's achieved politically, which is, of course, he's failed to lock up Hillary. He's failed to make Mexico pay for a wall. He couldn't clearly condemn neo-Nazis. He only appoints either his family or highly incompetent people to positions that they really shouldn't be in. I point you towards head of the EPA and Betsy DeVos, head of the education department. He retweets Britain First without even apologising or deleting a tweet from someone who's now since been obviously totally deleted from Twitter. And the only piece of meaningful legislation that he's passed in 365 days has given an awful lot of money to billionaires. Of course, afterwards, he stood in front of a massive room of billionaires and shouted, "You all just got a lot richer," meaning that other departments have to seriously cut their budgets in order to sort of make way for this tax cut. So essentially, he's maxed out the credit cards in the hope of creating a very short-term bubble. And it's just, I don't see how anyone can really deem this president.
OK, but Martin, I think you're missing something here, and you're clearly not a fan of his at any level, and that's fine. But aren't you missing something here? Isn't what he's doing actually carrying out the programme, or manifesto, as we say in this country? Isn't he doing exactly what he said he'd do? Whether it's moving the embassy, in Israel to Jerusalem, whether it's these big tax cuts, whether it's bringing in, very strict vetting, or even bars for a period of time from countries that he deems to be dangerous, isn't he just carrying out what he was elected to do?
Well, A, no, and B, he
because he is. Well, of course he is. All those things, Martin, I just mentioned to you, were things he promised he'd do. Now, the wall. You mentioned the wall. I believe, before the end of this term, he will have built a southern border.
Well, I think I would probably take you up on that bet quite happily. But I think during the election campaign, he regularly lambasted Obama for golfing twice a year or whatever it was, and he just can't stop golfing. When the missile alert in Hawaii, when the missile alert in Hawaii went out, he was golfing. He didn't tweet or anything, using that amazing Twitter account that he has to calm everyone down. No, he continued golfing, Nigel.
Well, Drake went on playing bowls, didn't he, as the Armada appeared off the western approaches. Martin, Eisenhower played a lot of golf, but he played a lot of golf with, foreign ambassadors, business people. Trump plays a fair bit of golf, you're right. He even played with the Prime Minister of Japan and other people that he deems to be quite important. Obama played golf 2 afternoons a week with his mates, and that perhaps is the difference. Look, whether he plays golf twice a week or not isn't really the point. Given that you clearly think he's failed at everything, so do you think he's going to get a drubbing in these midterms in November?
I hope so, but the realist in me also thinks he's going to be a 2-term president, because all he has to do is keep the base in the Rust Belt happy by tweeting stupid stuff about transgender people not being able to get into the army, or attacking liberal groups like the Planned Parenthood and stuff like that, and the sorts of people that hate all manner of different groups of people because that's what God would want. Then they're going to vote for him again. So
well, you know what, Martin? Your analysis is joined today by very highly respected historian Andrew Roberts, who writes a piece in the Mail on Sunday today. And he says the most shocking part of Trump's first year, it's not the sleaze, the Russia links, or those ridiculous tweets. It's that he might win a second term. He agrees with you. Martin, I thank you for the call. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC. It's 11:17. Right, let's get your thoughts, your calls. Trump a year on, success or failure. Charlotte in the Forest of Dean, you're on LBC. What do you think?
Good morning, Nigel.
Good morning.
Well, I've been really enjoying this first year of Trump's presidency, mainly because I think it's been so interesting, as with the Brexit vote that we had, how it's drawn all the absolute madness of the left into the foreground, and it's made them look absolutely ridiculous.
In what way, Charlotte?
I think it because the railing that, as a previous caller said, every single minutiae of every tweet, every action of Trump has just, it revokes a totally over the top reaction from the media, from other government things, as we've seen with Sadiq Khan over the state visit. It's literally triggered them to the point where they're now starting to look like a complete and utter zoo, and not particularly credible.
Right. Okay. So he's baited them so much, and he does bait them, doesn't he? I mean, the one thing about
he does.
Yeah. He deliberately baits the left and the media, doesn't he?
Well, he does, and I think, what he's done, and I think rather cleverly, perhaps, however intentional or not it might have been, but what he's saying is he's bringing he's bringing certain issues to the fore.
Yeah.
Say about the Islamic problem, the problem that we have with jihad, not here but also in Western Europe. And that he's trying with the Dreamers scheme, for example, the undocumented migrant children.
Yes,
there are 700,000 of those, I understand. And what he's trying to do is bring all that to the fore and say, look, we must actually stop just bringing all and sundry in here. We don't know who these people are. So they say they've been checked, but actually they probably haven't been thoroughly checked. And now we've got a problem, and we've got to do something about it, which is a damn sight more than Mrs May's been doing over here. She's just been opening the doors and saying to Macron, let them all in.
Yeah, and
who cares if they blow up a few people in the process, collateral damage.
And the other thing, Charlotte, that really gets my goat is if you smuggle yourself onto the back of a truck in Calais and get to the United Kingdom, you've come here completely illegally, and yet you seem to be able to claim asylum and stay. So there's a lot of stuff here I'd like us to deal with. But Charlotte, I love the fact that you're actually enjoying it all. The one thing I hope all of us can agree on, Charlotte, you, me, and maybe even the left can agree on, is it's not boring, is it, with Donald Trump?
Oh, it isn't. And if he releases that memo, then I expect to see fireworks, although they will try and dampen it down depending on what the content is. But I'm rubbing my hands here and getting the popcorn.
Terrific, Charlotte. Great fun. Well, Charlotte there, a big supporter of what the Donald is doing. We're in a minority in this country, it has to be said. On Twitter, Adam says, such a success, he has managed to close down Congress just because he can't get his wall. It's not about the wall, Adam. It is about, and, you know, Charlotte just talked about it, it is about a lot of undocumented young people in America. Should they be allowed to stay? Shouldn't they? They are illegal immigrants, and that's why the Democrats are kicking up the stink they are. Is this going to play? So is this going to be seen by Americans to be the Trump shutdown because he has failed as president to get a deal? You know, the man that wrote a book, The Art of the Deal. Or will it be seen as the Democrat shutdown because they're so in favour of illegal immigration, they've stopped government functioning? I don't know how this will play out, but I think they're the two sides of the argument on this shutdown. Andrew is a first-time caller from Wickham. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Nigel. Thank you so much for an entertaining show so far. It's Winchester, actually, not Wickham.
Oh, well, we've got people here that can't spell properly, but never mind.
Maybe my pronunciation.
Good morning, Winchester. Very good indeed. I tell you what I do know in Winchester is a place called the Wickham Arms, but that's another story.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. Andrew, is he a success or is he a failure?
I think he's a great success, and I think the trouble with all people who perhaps are great, not all the public want to hear the truth all the time. I think people obviously are nervous when anyone puts their head above the parapet. But every now and again, you need people like Donald Trump, you need people like Margaret Thatcher to let people know really what is what. And I think I'm not in a minority, and I think people who support Trump are obviously not in a minority. The guy got elected. But I think it's not a popular thing for people to want to be seen is putting their head above the parapet. I think this is why there is maybe a perceived media backlash, is because the media want to be popular and they want to respond to what they think people want to hear. But I think what these people forget is that there's always the silent majority. And I think people, when they think in the privacy of their own homes and at polling booths, aren't so silly. I think most people can see the wood for the trees, and they can see through all of it. So I don't think there's a worry about all this media backlash. I think, in fact, it works until like Trump's favour.
And do you think, Andrew, do you think it's seemly for an American president to literally go on the assault against the New York Times and CNN?
Yes. He has as much rights as me, as you. If he thinks that they're being unfair, I think he has absolute right to say what he says. It's impossible to know what's true and what's not. The thing is so big, so unwieldy, that I don't think any one person really has enough information in the public domain. The lay public don't.
No.
I think you have to see what's out there and just take a common sense approach.
Well, he's shaking it up, Andrew, and that's one of the things, isn't it, that Brexit voters wanted, and one of the things that Midwest voters in America wanted is they wanted a disruption. They wanted genuine change, and they're getting it from him, and he's telling it straight. Andrew, I thank you for your call. Anne-Marie has a criticism that many have. She says on Facebook, he said he wouldn't give big tax breaks to those at the top. Last week, he awarded lifelong billion-dollar tax breaks to him and his rich mates, while giving tax breaks to those at the bottom of just $10 to $14 a week. On individual personal taxation, Anne-Marie, I understand the point you're making, absolutely. But, believe me, this big corporate tax cut that he's made is going to transform America. It's going to bring jobs. Loads of people, thousands, tens of thousands of people had $1,000, $2,000 Christmas bonuses just a week after this legislation got through. And I think, whatever your views on his personal tax policies, I think what he's done on corporate tax will be the crowning achievement of his presidency. That's my view, because I think their economy's extraordinary. Gilbert takes a different view. Total success. Forget about his tweets, focus on his policies. We all need leaders who put their countries first, or we lose our country. Well, Gilbert, you're absolutely right in that. The concept that you put your own country and its people first is one that is now gathering pace across Europe and the whole of the Western world. Marion is calling from Finchley. Good morning, Marion.
Oh, good morning, Nigel. Yes, he is putting his country first, and he is the only president or anyone in the world who has actually made North Korea shiver a bit. And the fact that China, who of course caused the horrific Korean War in the first place, have been supporting North Korea all this time, which, if there hadn't been, North Korea would have collapsed many, many years ago and would most certainly not have got the nuclear bomb. The fact that China now has agreed to strengthen sanctions against North Korea is a tremendous step. It's, I think, thanks to President Trump. And also now they are sending a delegation to the Winter Olympics, which...
Yeah, I was amazed to see that.
Yeah, we don't know, do we? No one knows what's going to happen, whether it's Kim Jong-un playing games. But the fact is that Trump, when he says my button is bigger than yours, nobody knows whether to take him seriously or not. They've never dealt with anybody before.
And they never will. They never will again, Mary. This is a complete one-off, isn't it? But I agree with you. The other week, I was being interviewed by John Humphreys, and he said, well, and we were talking about being forthright in politics and you know, what does it achieve? And he said, well, he's not very diplomatic, is he? I said, no, but isn't it amazing? He's actually got a conversation going about Korea and within Korea. So it's funny, isn't it? There are lots of different ways to achieve success. Do you think, Marion, he's exposed China to the world on North Korea properly?
Yes, there's much more to be done, of course, on China, but he has started the process, and I think it's a hopeful sign. I've been to South Korea 8 times. I love the country, and I love the people, and I would love to see reunification, but it would be a very difficult process. But what we need to do, of course, is get Kim Jong-un to give up his nuclear weapons. This is the greatest danger to the whole world.
Couldn't agree more with you. Marion, thank you. Great call. This is the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show. It's 11:30. At the end of last year, LBC's US correspondent Simon Marks put together a documentary about Trump's first year, but crucially, looking ahead to the challenges of 2018. As I've mentioned before, these big midterm elections coming up for Congress, and they really do matter. So, to start with, he went to Texas and he spoke to Tracy Ware, who's the morning show host on KTSA Talk Radio. Now, as you can imagine, you know, Texas, this is real Trump land. And Simon asked whether it's actually Trey Ware, it's a guy, it's not Tracy, I'm sorry. And Simon asked Trey whether Trump voters, a year on, are sticking with him.
Everybody here is realizing now the proof is in the pudding. When we see what's happening with the stock market, when we see what's happening with the tax plan that has passed, when we see what's happening with record low unemployment, particularly in the Latino community here, and the black community has an unemployment rate at a 17-year low. A lot of people are putting their faith and trust. They may have been skeptical a little bit at first, at the beginning of the Trump administration, but now they're looking and saying, hey, this is actually working out. The proof is in the pudding, as we say.
Yeah, but hang on a second, Trey. He hasn't drained the swamp, as he put it, here in Washington.
No,
he hasn't built the wall along the Mexico border. That's a big issue in your part of the world. He hasn't repealed and reformed Obamacare, which he said he would do. He hasn't closed America's borders to Muslims, just to some of them. Again, another promise broken. And legislatively, sure, he's got the tax cut passed, but it's not clear that many of his voters will see immediate benefits from that. So why the loyalty to him?
Well, we can take each of those issues, but it would take too long to go through all of those. I can tell you this, though, when you talk about draining the swamp, the 3 that we played at the top of the program here, you played at the top of the program, they are going to be leaving their Senate seats very soon. And there are those others. We've had a record number, I believe, this year of those in Congress saying, I'm not coming back. I am choosing to step out of this and do something else with my life. Some of them are Republicans who have been the traditional, if you will, establishment Republicans for quite some time. Rome wasn't built in a night or in a day, as they say, and some of these things are going to take a very long time. He has had a solid year of media in the states that has been opposed to him. You've had a solid year of the permanent state in Washington that's been opposed to him, blocking him at every turn, but that is slowly changing, Simon. And I think that people who are at least plugged into this kind of thing realize that change is actually happening.
So, Talk Radio Texas style, still very much strongly behind Trump. And to get a different perspective, Simon Marks asked David Rennie of The Economist and looked ahead to how the Democrats might do in these elections in 2018.
2018 will tell us two things about the future of the Democratic Party. One is obviously there's some big elections at the end of the year which will decide who controls Congress. And in this strange moment that we live in, everyone understands that question, who controls Congress, is also the question, will Donald Trump be impeached next year? Because if Democrats take control of Congress, then about 5 minutes after swearing in the new Democratic majority, they will impeach Donald Trump. So that's the stakes. That's understood in the White House. People have told Donald Trump to his face that that is what's at stake. But there's also going to be an awful lot of activity looking to 2020 and the next presidential election. And you can already see a long, long list of people, all of whom figure that they are the answer to the question, what's the opposite of Donald Trump? Because it's a reasonable bet that the opposite of Donald Trump is not a bad thing to be at the next presidential election. And so you're going to see a giant kind of contest already as early as next year underway.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like, a sort of dummy run for the next presidential election that'll be taking place at the end of this year in the USA. And I get by text, every media outlet and newspaper except Fox News backed and supported Hillary. And you wonder why he calls them out as fake news. Well, I know that feeling very well indeed. Jason is calling from Watford. Jason, are you a Trump fan?
Yes and no. I can't answer that in a straightforward answer because
okay.
I was a fan of his policies in the sense that he's a straightforward talking man. That's what I thought he was. Mm-hmm. I respected the fact that he said he was going to do a lot of things and he tried. He kind of proved that in America being the president isn't necessarily the job that you think it is. In other words, if you think you want to do something, you can't just go ahead and do it.
No, that's true.
He got blocked off at every angle. I get angry listening to this show in the sense that there's certain aspects of Trump where people have got to see him for what he really is. And yes, he's he's like a man that suffers with ADHD, and he's got this kind of he thinks and then speaks. Sorry, he speaks and thinks afterwards. He doesn't stop and think to himself, I'm running one of the most powerful countries in the world. Is it the right thing to say? And then you've got people, yourself included, that laugh at some of the offensive tweets. It's just say, oh, it's a joke. It's not meant to be said in a harmful way. Well, but it is harmful. You can't say something.
Jason, hang on. Just stop you for a second. My button's bigger than yours. That is funny, isn't it?
But it's not funny when you're running with people like my children. Don't see that as funny. They think to themselves, "Hang on a minute, Dad, is there about to be a nuclear war?" Because the most powerful man in the world is saying my nuclear button's bigger than yours.
Okay, well, I see it, Jason. I see it as him just taking the mickey. That's how I see it. And also I know that one of the ways on Twitter that you get this massive following, it isn't all serious stuff. People actually like to have a laugh as well. But no, I mean, look, Jason, if your kids see that and think, gosh, is there something to worry about, then I do take the point.
No, Nigel, I've got 2,000 followers on Twitter, and I love getting more followers because I understand the buzz you get from it. It's almost like an addiction. But I can say something, I can call you out on something just to try and get more followers on Twitter.
Sure.
Justin Bieber can do it. Piers Morgan can do it. But when you're running America, you've got to have a certain amount of logic. And I want to see, for me, Donald Trump, whatever he does, there's people like yourself, and it's not an outright criticism of you, but there's people like yourself that just can't ever see when he's ever doing anything wrong.
No, and I think we've got, Jason, that's not true.
We've got to. Well, it feels true when I listen to your show on a weekly basis. It feels true to me. And then you've got the other aspect of it that he's just like things like Israel. For me, why do you think he was so supportive? And I'm Jewish, so I'm pleased he's supportive of Israel. But why do you think he was so supportive of Israel? Why do you think he did what he did? Do you think if his daughter wasn't married to a seriously religious Jewish man, do you think he would have been so supportive of Israel?
Does it matter? Sure he would have been. Jason, does it? The fact that Trump is so pro-Israel and pro-Jewish, does it matter what the reasons are?
Well, as long as he's doing it for the right reasons.
I think he is.
I don't want to. Well, I hope he is. I really hope he is. And as I say, I respect the man for doing A lot of the things, I love people that say they're going to do something, then go out and do it, no matter whether it's right or indifferent.
So, Jason, a year on, I'm listening to you, and you're very critical of some things he does, but quite praiseworthy of others. Is it kind of for you? Is the jury still out?
You know what, though, Nigel? I'm not saying I'm very critical or I'm very pro of it. I'm just saying that, yes, the jury is still out, very much so the jury is still out. And he has a lot to prove, because a lot of the things he says he's going to do, he's unable to do it. So now let's see what he does. You know, I mean, I can't argue with you about politics. You will absolutely put me into shame. I phoned you up once years ago, and you said to me about he's going to we're going to get better trade deals for the UK. And I said to you, well, what are we going to trade? We're already selling them Rolls Royces and Range Rovers and Jaguars and Dyson Hoovers. And I didn't understand it, and you didn't really give me an answer that really made any sense, because I don't think you fully understood what we were talking about that day. But I'd love to see Donald Trump be a massive success, purely on the basis of the fact he's a businessman. I believe there's not enough businessmen running our country. So if you put Richard Branson in the NHS, and he got a load of real top doctors to help him run the NHS, he'd probably do a much better job than what's currently going on.
Do you know, Jason, there was earlier on. In fact, the second caller we had this morning said, but he's not qualified to do this. And the point, really, Jason, about government everywhere is that virtually nobody who sits in the British cabinet has any experience at all of the area they're in charge of. And I remember John Reid, Labour cabinet minister under Blair, a very impressive guy in many ways, but Reid had 8 different cabinet jobs in the space of 10 years. So there is a problem with that, and I do like the idea of getting some business people involved. Jason, I thank you very much for your call, and Jason can see good things, but thinks he's just a bit too flippant, thinks he should take it a bit more seriously, really. I don't think he's going to. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 11:45. A year in, I'm asking, is Trump a success or a failure? I'm not asking, do you like him? That's irrelevant. We don't need to like our leaders to think they may just be doing a decent job. And, of course, the reverse is true. We might think a leader's a really nice man or a really nice woman, but completely and utterly useless. This is not... I'm not asking you to say whether you think he's a good guy. I'm asking you, is he succeeding a year on in the job to which he was elected? And your texts and tweets coming in, even though it's Sunday morning, some of them are really without charm, I would say. Nigel, you are an idiot. It's a good start, isn't it? You've been given a platform to have an intelligent discussion on the mess you've put the UK into, but you spend it on Trump. Well, Dr. Ralph, last Sunday, if you were listening, Alistair Campbell came into this studio for a whole hour and didn't just debate with me, but took your calls as well. And Lord Adonis came into the studio and took phone calls and was here for half an hour. So, in fact, 75% of last week's Sunday show was with 2 of the most prominent Remainers in this country. So I think we do our best to make sure that all shades of opinion get discussed, and I'm not forgetting about the EU, I promise you. I'm going to go to Aaron, who's calling from Kensington. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, Mr. Farage.
Good morning.
Let me just say, it's an honour to speak with you, sir, and I think it's a very good question you ask.
Yes.
Yeah, and the answer is he's an abject failure.
Okay.
Absolute failure. He's done nothing of the things that he said that he would do. Only the thing, and first of all, the things that he was going to do are all horrific, right? Build a wall. Nobody builds walls. We tear down walls in this day and age. But, sir, let me just quickly say, in answer to your question, the one thing that he's done was he got this tax cut. That tax cut gives the money to the rich and steals from the poor. He's an abject failure, sir.
Well, Aaron, whether you like things he's done or not, for example, moving the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Now, people say, oh, it's terrible, it's provocative. What chance is there what hope is there of peace in the Middle East? But Aaron, he promised people he'd do it, and he's kind of done it. The tax cuts, yeah, I get your argument, and, lots of people have been texting and tweeting in Aaron saying this, but again, it was something he promised he'd do. And I wonder whether that people who criticise Trump and that perhaps don't like Trump, but whether they're not trying to replay the election, really.
I'm at loss for words, actually. I'm a fan of your show. I like your style, but I'm really oppose your views. And to move the embassy to Jerusalem, he did promise some people. Which people? The Jewish lobby in New York. What possible difference does it make to the rest of the world? It means a possible war is what it means.
Well, But Aaron, you know, the point I'm making is we're not arguing whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. The fact is he promised he'd do it and he did it. I mean, do you find the way he speaks and the way he acts, is it that you find him offensive, Aaron? Is that what the real problem is?
Well, I find him utterly offensive on so many levels. So many levels. And I think I don't even have to list them. They're just glaringly obvious on a daily basis. I end on one quickly point, sir. The native Indian Americans that he so openly offends and mocks had a saying that goes, he speak with forked tongue. And I think that really applies to Donald Trump, the hypocrite and liar that he is.
Aaron,
but thank you, sir, for your time.
No, you couldn't have put it more clearly, and that's what free speech and debate and LBC living in a democratic country is all about. Aaron, thank you very much indeed for your call. Even if he is joking about having a bigger and more powerful button, that is still ridiculous. The leader of the free world shouldn't be joking about nuclear weapons, says Thomas from Birmingham, and quite a lot of you take that point of view. But hey, I tell you something, we're living in a different world. This Twitter age is different. The language has changed, the context has changed, and hey, the President of America uses it as his first port of call every morning at about 5:30 before any press officers or any minders have got anywhere near him. He's sending his thoughts out to the world, including one back last year suggesting that I should become the US ambassador in Washington. Not one that the government have carried out, but hey. Robert is calling from Dulwich. Good morning, Robert.
Hi, morning, Nigel. Thanks for taking the call. Look, I think Donald Trump isn't just becoming a leader for many of the US peoples, but I think there are a lot of people in the West, in Europe, who will come to see him as some sort of leader, because we're just so tired of what we're being offered by the people in Europe. I listened to Macron this morning. And Macron is a bit like Blair. He has that Svengali way of talking and reassuring you.
Isn't he? He's the French Blair. I couldn't agree more.
He is the French Blair. And you know, people are tired of this. Look, I am half Haitian. I lived in Haiti.
Now, didn't your home country get a bit of a reference from the US president the other day? It's Sunday, Robert. It's Sunday.
I won't say the word.
No, please.
But I can tell you, I have a claim to fame. I live in South London. I live in Dulwich. And I am a half Caribbean kipper. Right? I'm a half Haitian kipper. And I absolutely loved what Donald... I must be the only one in the party. Well, yeah. But look, I loved what Donald Trump said, because, you know, once you remove all that, and I don't like making references to race, but once you remove all that white middle class faux outrage, right, the people in Haiti 100% agree. For me, when I looked at the election, it was very easy, because we knew what the Clintons are like. The Haitians, you won't find more than 3 or 4 people who voted for the Haitians who voted for the Clintons. We know what that Clinton Foundation did and how they pilfered and robbed.
Well, Robert, I have to be...
I know.
I know there are some very severe allegations about the Clinton Foundation, and I may have my own views, but we have to be slightly legally careful about that. But, Robert, I think for somebody who's part Haitian to come on and say they weren't offended by Trump is really, really interesting. And he wasn't, in my view, offending people because of the colour of their skin. He was actually setting out to say some of these governments are rubbish, they're crooks, and people are doing badly as a result of it. Robert, I thank you very much indeed for your call. And I get this. I listen to news all the time and have not heard the official positives about Trump, only heard the negatives, says Gary from Epsom. On this show, Gary, you will hear both, I hope, and that is what we are trying to do. And my last caller of the morning is Pat, a first-time caller from Wiltshire. Good morning, Pat.
Good morning, Nigel. Thank you for taking the call. I wonder if there is somebody within the Trump camp who is a student of history and geopolitics, because to my shame, I'm old enough to remember that in the 1960s, the sainted President Kennedy ran a go-home bully campaign with the Americans over the Cuban missiles. God knows what he'd have done with the snowflake generation we have now. But that was successful. He stood up to the bully, and the bully went home again. And I think that's probably what Donald Trump is up to with South Korea. And he has been successful in engineering somehow or another some kind of rapprochement between the South and North Korea. They're sitting down and talking again after about 3 years of not talking. That can't be a bad thing. That's got to be good. That's a move forward.
So you think, Pat, by sort of calling this out, by highlighting the threat that North Korea could pose, he's done us a favour, Pat? Is that your view?
It concentrates the minds and makes people actually do something about it. You can't give in to bullies. You have to tell them that how many bees make five and that they go home. And if you look at the geopolitics of the area, somebody was talking about why earlier why America still has bases in Korea after all this time. Geography frames politics.
I think that's true. Pat, I'm going to have to leave it there because we're done. We're over. Thank you all for your contributions and some very strong and passionate ones. You've been listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'll be back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Coming up this afternoon at 3 o'clock, it's Alex Salmond. But up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel.